Motherhood is nobody noticing everything you do day to day to keep the house running and the kids happy and healthy, but everybody noticing as soon as you stop doing it all. I see you, mama, and in case nobody has told you lately, you are doing an incredible job, keeping everything ticking over. And that was posted on Instagram by Just Another Boy Mum. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Toy Talks podcast that I think I will be naming God Is In The Neighbourhood. Woo! So, I don't even know where to start. So, I actually recorded an episode yesterday and I don't know, listen, usually when I record, I just record and I've done a treatment, I've really thought about the themes and things I want to communicate. But yesterday I was just in a really weird mood and I felt like it came across in the episode that I recorded. And I'm in my 4th trimester. My hormones are just raging. They are raging. They are everywhere, always, somewhere. In a day, I could be 5 or 6 different moods, meaning I feel like 5 or 6 different people. I'm always hot. And just when I thought my hormones were stabilizing, I start my period, and that just is weird because it feels weird. Because I haven't had one in 9 months, and actually, you know, yes, that is the news. Put that on mute. I'm silent. Anyway, so yeah, it's just been. I just felt so weird. So I thought, no, that's not the episode I want to put out. This episode I'm recording is the one I want to put out. So obviously, as you may know, I became a new mum for the first time 4 months ago. My daughter is 4 months old. I honestly do not know where the time has gone. And it was actually Kay that reminded me that I actually gave birth 4 months ago. And he reminded me that I became a new mother 4 months ago. And this new chapter I entered 4 months ago, and it's not a long time. Bearing in mind I had a really traumatic birth as well. And for all intents and purposes, in everything that I went through, I physically seem to have healed quite well, but every so often my body reminds me that I'm pushing it too far. And it took Kay to remind me that it was only 4 months ago. That kind of jolted me into realizing that I keep pushing myself, and I'm pushing myself too far. And I'm doing it because subconsciously I already know some of the disadvantages that have been presented to me as a black woman. I already know that it's weird, isn't it, how as black women we are programmed. We are programmed by society who continue to reinforce to us that we are not enough. We often are in a state of survival. The workplace is not a safe place. In fact, being able to work remotely has been safer for me as a black woman, and as many of us black women can attest to, it has been safer being a black woman. It's been safer from the perspective of not having to be aware of our body language. If we use our hands to speak, if we're quite animated, we could be accused of being quite threatening, and the fragility of white women always being more superior. It's felt safer being a black woman because up until COVID, I was wearing wigs. In fact, sometimes I forgot what my hair looked like. I neglected my natural hair. I rejected my natural hair. And during COVID, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm tired. In fact, my hairline rejected wigs. It was just crazy that it felt safer for me in my blackness to go natural working remotely. And it didn't really stop there. Like, being pregnant is such a beautiful thing. The idea that as women we are creating life, and life is growing inside of us, and the child that is growing inside of us is hearing our heartbeat, is the closest person to your heart. Like, the magnitude of what pregnancy is mind-blowing if you allow yourself to really enter the state of understanding how vulnerable you are when you are pregnant. And I don't think you can ever prepare for pregnancy. I think what you can do is cultivate a really good foundation. But being prepared is really difficult because you do not know how you will react to pregnancy and how you will react to the 4th trimester, which occurs after you have given birth. And somebody told me about a 5th trimester. I was even confused. I was like, when does the 4th one stop and the 5th one continue? So I had to ask ChatGPT and it told me. But I guess the point I'm making here is I really do feel like, as negative as COVID was to people's mental health, to the lives it claimed through COVID, to the negligence of the government, it really did put everything on front street about everything. But if we look at the world of work and how we operate, a lot of children were born during COVID. People got to spend a lot of time with their families during COVID. And actually, children were born in COVID and people were taking their paternity leave in COVID. And when we speak about work-life balance and we talk about family life, I feel like it got pushed to the forefront of conversations because we were saving a lot of money and we were spending time with our families in a way that we would have never ever spent with them but for a pandemic that meant that we were often not allowed to leave our homes. I don't know if I can ever sit here and tell you, oh, you know, pregnancy is easy, because I guess when you talk to certain people, they'll give you a story. But what I can tell you for me is that I've never felt safe at work. Never. Even when I was younger and ignorant and thought I felt safe, I knew I wasn't safe because I had to alter who I was to be accepted. So if you have to do that, it's because you don't feel safe enough to be who you are. And then as I was growing up and I grew up and I had experiences and I started to experience all this work-related trauma, I realized that work would never be a safe space. And work for me was never meant to be a safe space. Work for me is a place where I basically have acquired skills enough to work and make money and be able to strategically navigate white spaces to make as much money as I can and pay my taxes, pay my bills, pay for certain things, and to pay for nice things. That's it. And I know it's a very simplistic way to look at things, but we actually work to pay taxes, number one, because you're taxed at source. And then you work for sustenance. That's exactly what it is. But we're going to get into that because, yeah, we're going to get into that. So for 9 months, I was holding down 2 contracts. Now, when I first found out I was pregnant, I had 1 contract. And my heart started racing because I was like, I'm a contractor. I haven't thought about how this would work in terms of, you know, having a child as a contract. Like, I just knew that I know how to make money. I'm a subject matter expert, and there's never going to be a perfect opportunity or perfect situation, a perfect amount of money you can have in your savings account to have a child. But what I did know is that I was never going to tell whoever I was working for that I was pregnant. So being able to work remote and it be more accepted because of COVID and because of lockdown meant that I stayed remote from the pandemic, the start of the pandemic. And up until now, I've been remote. And I've managed to maintain that. And it's been amazing. And even more so when I was pregnant, because I had consultant-led care. So I had a few more hospital appointments than, say, somebody who wasn't under consultant-led care. I was able to go to my appointments. I was able to, you know, go through the motion of being pregnant, and I had HG, so I was very sick within the first 12 weeks of my pregnancy. There was even one day where I was too sick to even log on. And if you're working remotely and you're too sick to log on, as a contractor, you're not getting paid that day. I must have been really sick because come hell or high water, I'm getting that day rate. Do you know what I mean? But I was really ill. And there was never a time when I thought, I'm going to just tell these people that I'm pregnant. Never. Because I already knew, for me, I didn't feel safe. But how much more safe, how much less safe would I feel telling them that I'm very vulnerable and I'm pregnant? And I just didn't feel comfortable doing it. So a few months after I found out I was pregnant, I then had an interview for another contract, and I had 2 contracts, and I personally do not know how I was managing 2 contracts whilst pregnant and being sick, having HG, and still attending every single medical appointment, every single midwife appointment. And when I think about it, as Black women, we are trained by our experiences, our trauma, and by society to operate from a state of survival. So what I was doing for the 9 months was operating from a state of survival. I knew that I had to hold down these 2 contracts to earn as much money as possible, to maximize my ability to be confident enough to have a maternity leave where I wouldn't have to worry about money. And that was my objective. Now, I had a podcast episode many months ago about financial literacy. And this is the reason why I was talking about things like that, because unless you do the groundwork of financial literacy, when you are now depending on drawing and bringing in certain finances, the only way you're going to do that is if you work on mending your relationship with money. So because I'd already done all of that, and I continue to do that work because I'm still a work in progress, and but I continue to do the work, I was able then to financially understand what I needed to do to be able to sit here and say to you, I am financially comfortable being on maternity leave. But the thing is, you never feel like it's enough, because when you're operating from a state of survival, you're operating from a state of fear. That's what survival is, a state of fear of being in a certain position that you won't be able to get yourself out of. And I say all of this knowing that I am married to a person that has an amazing job, makes good money, but we're living in a society where everything costs something. So if you're expecting the government to help you because you've had a child, that's not going to happen, because the thing is, you want to earn enough money to be comfortable, but the government won't allow you to be comfortable enough to take your foot off the brake. To take your foot off the brake, because if you earn over a certain threshold, you're also not entitled to certain things. But if you don't earn that threshold, how are you supposed to sustain your family? It is like a cycle of perpetual fear. It's a cycle of perpetual evading poverty. This society does not cultivate and encourage you to have children. But we'll get onto that in a minute. So I would often have Teams calls, and all you would see is from my shoulders up. I was always very careful not to stand up, because sometimes I would do that. You just stand up, maybe you're just fixing something behind your laptop, or and I had to be really, really careful to not do that, because obviously, you just do that. But I was protecting the fact that I was pregnant. There was even times I was on calls with one of my contracts, and one of my colleagues was like, "Oh, Toy, we'd love to meet up with you," and I had to find every which reason as to why I couldn't meet up, and my reason remained the same. The number of COVID cases are quite high, and therefore not coming into London. Or the fact that I don't live in London was an excuse enough, because who's paying for me to come into London? I don't need to. And the thing is, I don't know what it is about these people that we work with, where when you work remotely, this needs to see you, this needs to size you up, I don't want to break bread with you. I work remote because I do not want to be in a work setting building with you. I work remotely because I choose that this is the best way for me to be efficient. Anything outside of this is social, and I don't want that. Some people operate from a space of wanting to be social as part of navigating the world of work. As a Black woman, if you're going to operate from that space, then you have to be willing to compromise your integrity too, and be happy with your boundaries being crossed constantly. I don't think there is a balance that can be struck between being social and being professional, I think you need to choose one. And it's taken a lot for me to conclude that. But the reason I say it is because if you are too social as a black woman, you have to be accepting that you're compromising. You have to compromise yourself. Because in order to be as social as them, in order to be as accepted or perceived accepted, you have to be able to forego personal information as well. So you have to compromise yourself. And then if you give them too much, you're done for. So you have to then police how you be social. Are you really being social then? Because to be really social, you shouldn't have to police anything. So the question to ask, are you really coming as yourself? You have to be able to wear different masks. For someone like me, I would definitely say that I'm one of those people that I understand how to navigate the world of work and how to assimilate. But what I can't do is be fake. The mask that I wear is, and it's not even a mask, I wear the hat of being professional 95% of the time. About 5% is the interpersonal skills that I have learned, that to be interpersonal, I can, tell a couple of jokes here and there, but you don't need to know that I'm married and I've been married for 2 years. You don't need to know I've got a child. You don't need to know that information unless I'm willing to accept what comes from trading that information. And there is a level of familiarity that will come. Now, for certain workplaces, you have to be able to figure out where you can be a little bit more familiar. But for me, I'm so long in a tooth that I completely have shut that off. But when I was navigating, when I was a bit younger, I was actually really, really good at balance. When I was burnt to the point where I realized that nothing would ever change in a workplace, that I'm always going to either be the token or I'm gonna feel like, or be made to feel like I'm not good enough. Once I accepted that was gonna be somewhat of my employment identity, I think in my 20s I just learned how to be manipulative. I can't lie. I learned how to be a bit more manipulative. I feel like now I'm in my late 30s, I'm just at that stage in my life where I'm like, no, I'm unapologetically me. And I think because I spent so much time trying to figure out who I was and then trying to be who everybody else expected me to be, that I just got tired. And I realized, hang on, I am the shit. I am the source. Become a subject matter expert. Have a skill set that is undeniable. And yes, you have to be able to wear different hats, but I don't have to wear a different mask. I'm happy to wear different hats, but to wear a different mask means I have to be fake. And whilst I understand the difference between pretending and being fake, I'm choosing to take and toe the professional line. I say all of this to say, being remote and being pregnant and having to be very forceful about not meeting up with my staff colleagues, it was easier because COVID was still hot off the press at that time. I feel like now I think it would be easier just because I'm a bit more senior. Do you understand? And I feel like after a couple of times, that organisation realised that I just wasn't interested in them. I'm just not that into you. I'm just not that into you. And I think there's certain places you work for, and some of them don't realise it, and they shouldn't realise it until they try to push your boundary. And then they need to be able to automatically know you're just not that into them. And people always say, well, in order for you to climb up the career ladder, you have to be sociable, you have to be this. Yeah, I would beg to differ. I would say you have to be strategic. And being strategic, if it means once a year going to after work drinks, fine. But I feel like COVID has made it as such that you don't have to justify why you're not going to that after work drink anymore. Do you understand? I feel like things have changed, but as human beings, we're not taking advantage of the opportunity of what that change has provided us. People are not using the voice in which has been given to us through COVID. It's okay to say to somebody, oh, actually, do you know what? I can't do after work drinks, unfortunately. I've got my family that I need to spend some time with. Because spending time was something that flowed through COVID and lockdown. But it's almost like we have had this glitch in our minds, and we've allowed society to provide a glitch whereby we've completely erased everything we learned from lockdown, and suddenly we've become these people who just skipped lockdown and went straight back into work again. It's weird. I find it quite strange. I digress. So anyway, with my other contract, it was fine because it was a remote role. They knew it was remote. I think one of the managing directors tried to say that he really likes it when people come in and are collaborative, and I had to remind him, well, I signed a contract for remote, so whatever it is that you like, unfortunately, that doesn't include me. And I was always very professional, but I was very clear that these were my boundaries. So people stopped expecting, stopped asking. My second contract, when I was there a month, and then it was like the following month was Christmas. And they were like, oh, we're having a Christmas party. And I was like, oh, sorry, I work outside of IR35. So unfortunately, because of HMRC regulations, I can't be doing Christmas parties. And then with my other role that was inside IR35, I just said to them, I don't celebrate Christmas. What are you going to say to that, please? I don't celebrate Christmas. And some people don't. And they couldn't ask me, is it religious? They couldn't ask me because we're living in a sensitive society. So they know not to even ask me that question. So being able to navigate work whilst being pregnant was actually easy. It was easy for me because I'd taken all the lessons from lockdown and I adopted it. And also I had a financial objective. So in order for me to achieve that financial objective, I had to stay working those 2 contracts, and they needed to not know I was pregnant, because the other side of things is the vulnerability side. So I remember I posted something on TikTok a few months before it was a few months before I announced that I had given birth. And it was about oversharing, and some woman, and it's still on, the comment is still on my TikTok, and she basically said that she felt like she had overshared in her workplace and shared with her organisation that she was pregnant, and her manager made her life hell, and she actually had a miscarriage because of the stress placed upon her from her manager as soon as her manager knew that she was pregnant. And I was pregnant at the time, and that made me really sad, but it reinforced to me how vulnerable as black women we are, and how even more vulnerable we are when we are pregnant at work, and why I was doing my pregnancy in private on so many different levels. And now it's a bit more difficult when you're a perm member of staff, because there is employment legislation that basically says that when you 15 weeks before your due date, you have to notify your employer that you are pregnant. And that's because it triggers things like statutory maternity, it triggers the things that would protect you when you, like laws that protect you when you need to do your medical appointments and things like that. And you can't not tell them. But I think what you can do is be very educated about what your legal protections are as a perm employee when you're pregnant, and how to utilize them. Because as black women, I don't think we do that very well. But white women do it very, very well. Extremely well. And they know how to use their fragility to get what they want. And the law provides for them, the employment law provides for them, and the added fragility of being pregnant within the laws that protect you when you're pregnant and you're going through maternity. And this is the reason why I did the maternity masterclass, because going through my pregnancy, doing pregnancy in private, and there is a privilege in being able to have done it in private, and I recognise what that privilege is, but it's a privilege I worked for. It's not one that was given to me. I worked my arse off to be even in the position I am now, but even more so utilising the position I am now to its advantage. Listen, I don't know why people, or what motivates people, or why people work hard for what they want. I work hard for what I want so I can have a peaceful life as well. There's an element of peace that I need to attain in my life. And I felt like I learned from COVID, and I laid down core foundations like financial literacy, like boundaries, like career confidence, like being a subject matter expert, So now when I had to cash in on all those learnings, that cashing in was, right, now I'm vulnerable, I'm pregnant. What can I do? What is within my power to do to maintain a situation where I can get my finances up to cover maternity, where I can, you know, really climb the career ladder as quickly as possible before I have to take time out to focus on motherhood. And then there's the other aspect of returning to work. And I'm going to do a separate episode about that, because I realised like quite a few things, and I may highlight some of those things in this episode. So when I did the maternity masterclass, for me, it was really important to deliver a maternity masterclass for Black women, to Black women, about Black women first. Because unless you know what you're entitled to, stop depending on your employers to tell you. Some of them don't know, and some of them do know, but don't want to give it to you because you're a Black woman. Some employers will use your pregnancy against you, and they will do it in the most micro way. And unless you're clued up about it, you're not even going to see it. But it will affect you, and by the time you noticed it, you're even too tired from the pregnancy to deal with it. And this is why I always say it's about educating yourself. Knowledge is power. And the sooner you understand the power that knowledge yields, is the sooner that you can use that knowledge to protect you when you're most vulnerable, like when you're pregnant. So the maternity masterclass tells you basically when you have to do things. I've even done a template and drafted the notification letter to your employers. And I cover confidentiality, because again, I remember receiving a dilemma, and somebody had basically notified their employer that they were pregnant, and the employer went and told the whole company. That woman was so uncomfortable in that job. When she gave birth, she didn't even end up going back to the job again, because of the way they treated her, made her feel. The saying is, a pregnant woman always remembers how she was treated during her pregnancy, because it's the time when we're most vulnerable. So I remember every damn thing and the lack thereof. A few months ago, I was really pissed about something, and it weighed on my heart so heavily that I knew that I would have to talk about it on this podcast, and here it is on this episode. Someone I know is pregnant, and she's a white woman, and I watched her tell everybody, and I say everybody as in everyone she was working with, that she was pregnant. She wasn't even 12 weeks. And the reason I was pissed off is when she came to tell me this, she was so confident and comfortable to tell me that she told her employer and she's quit her job and this, that, and the third. And I thought, wow, must be nice. Yeah, that saying must be nice. Because I watched her do something that was just normal or natural for her to do. It was normal for her to feel so excited that she told everyone. I wouldn't have done it that way. But the level of privilege to feel that confident, I cannot relate. As a white woman, she didn't feel that she'll be treated in a disadvantageous way. As a white woman, she didn't feel vulnerable to tell her employer. As a white woman, she felt comfortable to tell them that she was pregnant. I just looked at her. I didn't know what to say when she told me. But I remember feeling pissed off because then I was remembering the lady that left the comment on my TikTok and the consequences that she experienced from sharing that she was pregnant. Because when you tell your employer you're pregnant, especially when you're pregnant, especially when you're in the throes of that pregnancy, if you're suffering from HG, you're looking for sympathy and empathy. That's what you're looking for. And you're looking for protection. That's what you're looking for from your employer. I'm looking for protection. Help me here. I'm pregnant. What can this employment do for me so that I can give birth peacefully from an employment perspective? That's what you're looking for. But some of you ain't going to find it. Because some employers see you now as a hindrance. Oh God, if you're late for work, oh God, it's the pregnancy. No, actually, there's a train strike. Oh, I'm not feeling too well. Oh, it's the pregnancy. Well, maybe it might be, or it might be the 25 emails I've received in the last 10 minutes. There's a vulnerability that pregnancy has. And what you're looking for your employer is to allow you to enforce your rights and to have some level of care and protection. What some of these employers don't realise is they owe you a duty of care anyway. And even more so when you're pregnant. There's an advanced duty of care that they owe you. For example, when you tell them you're pregnant, they need to be getting occupational health to now come and do a risk assessment of your work area to make sure that your workstation is still fit for purpose now that you're pregnant. When you come back from maternity, they need to be doing another risk assessment, because you could be breastfeeding, they need to make sure that your workstation and where you're working, and is there somewhere for you to pump if you need to pump? Yeah, these are the things that you're entitled to that they won't tell you. This is why I did the maternity masterclass, because I know they're not telling you guys these things. So when this person came now to tell me that she had told her employer that she's pregnant, and basically she was telling me the things that I as a black woman would have liked to have done, but no, that's not afforded to me. It was very interesting to hear her say that, this white woman, because she feels safe at work. And I didn't realise, it's really weird. Our normal as black women, for most of us, is to feel unsafe at work. It's very rare that I meet somebody who's safe at work and vocalizes it in the way that this pregnant woman has vocalized it. She feels safe to tell her employers that she's pregnant at 8 weeks. They say 12 weeks is, you have to go through implantation, viability, all of that stuff. So 12 weeks is usually when you have your first scan to make sure that the fetus is growing, that type of thing. So they usually tell you, that's why you notify your employer 15 weeks before the due date, because obviously in the 12 weeks, the first 12 weeks is the most vulnerable stage for a woman when she's pregnant. So this woman felt so safe at work to tell them before 12 weeks that she was pregnant. Must be bloody nice. And she was telling me this so confidently, I was pissed off, because there was no regard for the fact that me as a black woman, I can't lean into any fragility. My pregnancy, even being pregnant, didn't even afford me fragility. This one has barely pissed on a stick, and feels safe enough to lean into the fragility of pregnancy, as well as her added fragility as a white woman. I just didn't understand it. I didn't get it. And then I thought to myself, I need to observe how this woman proceeds with her pregnancy process in comparison to me that was doing David Blaine with mine. As me who was doing now you see me, now you don't. Yeah. Do you know how difficult it is to make sure that you don't stand up in the middle of the meeting, or I don't lean or do something that would show the top of my belly? And towards the end of my pregnancy, I was carrying heavy, because obviously I'm almost due. And for the very first time in my life, I looked at this white woman and I thought, how dare you? How dare you disrespect me by ignoring the lack of freedom I have as a black woman? You're not even acknowledging your privilege as a white woman, as you come and tell me that you've told your employer 8 weeks into your pregnancy that you're pregnant. You're not even recognizing how difficult it was for me. I had to hold down 2 jobs. You're quite happy if your employer tells you, okay, we don't want you anymore. You're cool, because as a white woman, you can hopscotch into a job tomorrow. They're not asking you to prove your academic qualifications, no. They're barely asking you to have experience. Being a white woman is enough for them to say, come in. Whereas the bar for me is so high. There's no barriers to entry for you as a white woman. pissed. And I've never felt that way before. You know, like sometimes you feel pissed in abstract. Or you feel pissed because you're but this was different. Because I have never felt more vulnerable in my career than I felt when I was pregnant. Because I was dependent on making this money, making sure I had a healthy pregnancy, and making sure these damn employers didn't find out I was pregnant. My ass was pregnant. I felt very vulnerable. And also as well, I felt vulnerable because if the doctor signed me off, because I have fibroids and I had an additional 2 fibroids. So I had 6 fibroids. And at the start, before I was pregnant, I had 4. The throes of this pregnancy, I had 6. So I was under consultant-led care. So at any time, if my blood pressure was too high, if the fibroids were in the wrong place, if they were growing exponentially, I could have been signed off on bed rest. So how did that work then? So when I'm telling you about vulnerability, I felt a medical vulnerability, and I felt vulnerable as a black woman. Because I know, as a black woman, if I had told my employers at the time I was pregnant, I may as well resign because they'll find a way to get rid of me. Because the view is, I can't do my job. Then it's almost like, I felt like, when you're working, especially in white-dominated industries, they're always looking for you to prove that you should be there. But when you're working in white-dominated industries as a black woman, then it's like, can you do the job properly because you're pregnant? Like, all these hormones are going to cause me to not do my job. Whereas the white woman doesn't even have to process that. All she's doing is skipping to her employer saying, I'm pregnant. They're never thinking about how that message will be received. And if they are, it's from this femininity discrimination, I'm a woman. But the reality is, you could just lean into your fragility as a white woman and it's fine. And somebody might listen to this and say, Toya, that's very presumptuous. But I'm sitting here telling you, I've not met a white woman who has had to hide that she was pregnant, hold down 2 contracts to make sure that she's financially covered. And I've never met a white woman that has sat in my face and told me that because of the colour of her skin, she feels unsafe in the workplace. That's what I'm telling you today. I've never met that white woman. Yeah, I was pissed. I'm still pissed about it. Because I know so many black women who have approached me and said, Toya, I'm pregnant. How should I tell my employer? I can count fingers and toes how many women have approached me during the course of my career and said that to me. So for me, the maternity masterclass is personal. It's a personal masterclass that goes on a quest to safeguard you as a pregnant woman, as a prospective pregnant woman, or as somebody who wants to clue themselves up on their entitlement because they're planning to start a family soon. That masterclass is for you. If you see the templates that I've drafted, if you see the thing, I really went in because I feel like the way this society is going to try to strong arm black women, it's about high time we have to understand what our rights are. And I'm starting with maternity rights because we are allowed to procreate and build families. White women are doing these things, and i.e. building families. They're not sitting there having this conversation that we're having here. The most they're probably thinking about is, oh my God, am I going to be able to come in the same position, or am I going to have to go 2 steps forward to go 3? Am I going to have to go 3 steps backwards to go forward in my career because I've left on a high? Yeah, maybe from those things. But I'm going to put something to you that I know, I feel comfortable enough to say to you. A white woman is not thinking about pay disparities from the same perspective we are. You see, when people talk about pay disparities, for example, they talk about it, the gender pay gap. Yeah? Nobody wants to talk about the racial pay gap. No one ever wants to talk about that. But no one also wants to talk about the racial pay gap for black women who decide to have families. They don't talk about that pay gap in comparison to white women that decide to have families. Nobody wants to talk about that pay gap. That is a deep conversation that needs to be had. I.e., the idea that because you've decided to start a family, you forego or take steps back in your ability to earn as much money as somebody who has chosen not to start a family. Because the view is that if you don't have a family, you can focus on work, you can focus on your career becomes your life. But no one talks about fulfillment. Sorry, for me, I did not feel completely fulfilled in my life just focusing on my career. Clearly not, because now I have a child. I didn't. Because after a while, you earn this money, you buy this, you buy that, you do all these things, you have all these experiences. But then you start thinking about legacy for some of us. For me, I started thinking about my legacy. What do I want my legacy to be? My child is my legacy. My career can only take me so far. Like, the society we live in is not built to facilitate or encourage women to have children. It isn't. Should we talk about maternity leave? 52, is it 52 weeks? 52 weeks. Should we talk about statutory maternity pay? £172 a week. Do you know how much nappies and milk are? In this cost of living crisis, £172 a week. And shall we talk about CVs? Do you think I'm putting on my CV that I've been on maternity leave? Is that what you think? Because I ain't doing that. Because if I do that, I'm literally calling in someone to come and discriminate against me because I've got a family, because the assumption is, oh God, she won't be able to concentrate at work, or her child will be sick so she'll be off all the time. That's going to be the narrative. Oh, I already know that. And I think it would be the narrative for any woman. But as a black woman, I'm not trying to give you more reason to not hire me. I'm not trying to give you more reason to discriminate against me. That is our reality as black women. That a white woman, sorry, she just start crying in an interview, they'll give her the job. Sorry, not sorry. So the only way for me, in my mind, to kind of contribute to try and even the playing field out here is to do a masterclass and just inform you of what your rights are. That's how I look at it. Some of you are probably thinking, well, Toya, how are you able to hold down 2 jobs whilst being pregnant? How are you able to claim statutory maternity leave and have savings? That's why I also have the freelance and consulting masterclass. In as much as I'm sitting here and I'm telling you how to, for example, in the freelance and consulting masterclass, how to become a freelancer and an interim and a consultant, the things to put in place, the infrastructure to create, all this stuff, how to do a CV that's more contractor based. I have all the templates there in that masterclass. But in as much as I'm telling you those things, I'm taking it a step further in that masterclass, and I'm also talking about maternity. So you not only have it as a masterclass on its own, but I also incorporate it in the freelance and consulting masterclass. And I do that because I don't think it's right to talk about career without talking about the possibility of having a family or getting married and how those things weave into the world of work. I have to talk about it. You know, for a long time, you know, I didn't think I wanted to be a mum because of, you know, the dysfunctional relationship I have with my mother. And I had to really work on the psychological side of working through a lot of my trauma in association with that. And then it was, you know, can I actually afford this? How would I afford it? Yeah, these are the things I feel as black women we think about in a way that I don't think white women thinking about it in the same way. They don't. Because I've had to look at some of my white friends sideways. I have had to, because I feel like there's a complete disregard to for me and my struggle as a black woman in the world of work too. And I feel like if you want to be an ally, you need to be an active ally. I'm so sorry. You need to be active. You can't be an ally in mouth alone. I need active. I need you to put me in contact with some of your contacts so I can try and tap into some of your privilege vicariously here. But that's how I feel. And some of you may say, oh, Toya, that's a bit extra. I don't care. I actually don't give a shit. Because as black women, I feel like there is so much that we go through and so much we have to think about that our non-black counterparts don't necessarily have to always consider. They don't. So for example, I have a friend who's Asian, And she and I have had a very honest conversation. And whilst our struggles have been different, the whole maternity and, you know, telling your employer you're pregnant and stuff like that has been very, very similar. And my friend, she said it to me. She says, you know, I have a white friend and she can never be a part of this conversation because she will never understand why we have to have this conversation, Toya. And the reality is she can take maternity leave and tap dance back into her job on compressed hours, and no one will blink an eyelid. She can come in late, Toya, after doing the morning drop-offs, and nobody will blink an eyelid. God forbid I come in late because I've had to do a morning drop-off. I will have my first warning. And I thought, oh my God, I never even thought about it like that. But it's true. It's really important that we're clued up about what our rights and entitlements are, because literally that is all you're going to have when you're trying to safeguard your interest, especially when you're going through pregnancy and maternity. Did you know that if you have an antenatal appointment, so an antenatal appointment would be like a hospital appointment or like a doctor's appointment or a midwife appointment, and it clashes at the same time as a meeting at work, your employer cannot ask you to reschedule the antenatal appointment. They need to facilitate you to go to that medical appointment. Did you know that? I bet you didn't know that. The legalities and the law surrounding maternity is not taught because they don't want you to know what you're entitled to. And employers will act stupid like they don't know. Some of them they know. They're just hoping you don't, so that you don't enforce your right. How are you announcing to a whole company that someone's pregnant and her pregnancy is high risk? Yeah, that's what one employer did. Let's just say she took more than the 52 weeks maternity leave in compensation for that reckless behavior. Yeah, and I helped her to do it. Because some of these employers are crazy. Imagine not feeling safe enough to say to your employer, I'm pregnant. That was my reality for 9 months. At one stage, Kay was like, how are you doing this? I said, my dear, because I work remotely, thank God. And number two, because when the camera is on, you only see my shoulders up. If you tell me I've put weight on, you need to tell me where I've put the weight on. No one can come to tell me I've put weight on my face. If you're telling me that, then I have to ask the question, why are you even checking for my weight though? You know, workplace, you don't talk about those things, especially remote. It would have been 10 times harder if I was a contractor going into the office being pregnant. Because the vulnerability of being a contractor already, that's a separate topic. But being pregnant, they'll find a way to get rid of you. Talk less of being a perm. Oh, absolutely not. They're navigating the transport system in this country being pregnant. I think not. No, I couldn't do it. Did you know that if you find it difficult to go into the office because you're pregnant, your workplace have to work with you and agree a way that you can do your job without having to physically be in the office. If going into the office, i.e. using the transport system, is causing you distress. Did you know that? Because your workplace has a duty of care. Some workplaces don't even have a maternity policy that extends to that. The policy will just tell you what you're entitled to. That's not a policy. I need to understand how you're safeguarding me during my vulnerable period of pregnancy. And that's what I cover in the maternity masterclass. So, listen, I felt very, very led to do this episode because I feel like I have been harboring so much annoyance at the fact that I'm watching people who are not black be pregnant and feel safe to share it in a way that as black women we're not safe. We don't feel safe. And I think we need to deal with the safety aspect of being a black woman in the workplace first, and then all the things that flow through it and from it. And when organisations ask me or invite me to come and do public speaking events, and they will share with me some of the issues they're having in their workplaces, I send them podcast episodes and say, I need you to listen to this first, and then we can talk. Because there's an element of how much education do you give people before you actually ask to be treated like a decent human being, and not be discriminated against because of the colour of your skin. Because for us as black women, it's twofold. It's the colour of our skin and then it's our gender. It's becoming very exhausting. So the only way and the only solution is to educate yourself. And that's why I've done the masterclasses. And for me, I feel so happy to be in a position whereby I'm able to educate my fellow black women on how to safeguard ourselves during pregnancy and during maternity, and what those entitlements are, how to enforce them, what the duty of care of the employer is to the employee. I felt very, very happy to be able to share that information, because I feel like, especially when you're pregnant, you're not thinking about those things. You're just hoping that your employer will do right by you. The reality is, 9 times out of 10, they probably won't. That workload will keep on piling. If your workload is stressing you out and you're pregnant, you can put in a formal request for them to reduce your workload. They can't change your pay, they can't change your status in the workplace, can't do none of that, because they're too afraid of being slammed with a request from employment tribunal. They're scared of that. Because discriminating somebody because of they're pregnant and sex discrimination are one and the same. They will get in trouble for it, and they don't want it. All you need to be able to do is prove it. That's it. Listen, I think I'm just so passionate, because obviously I'm currently on maternity, and I've had so many people approach me, ask me for advice. I've had like close friends ask me, and to be able to comfortably give them that advice has made me feel so good, because it means that I'm imparting that knowledge, and they're gonna go and share that knowledge with other people. And I'm just tired of not feeling safe in the workplace. I'm actually tired of it. I think that a lot more needs to be done for black women, for us to feel safe enough to just exist in the workplace without feeling as though we are always under attack. It's exhausting, it's tiring, and I no longer want that for my existence. I'm raising a daughter. I do not want that for her. I don't want her to get to a certain stage in her life where she's ready to start a family. She's there telling me of all the things that I felt saying this to you now. I don't want her to be telling me these things when she's old enough. I really don't. And actually, there has to be a balance between being professional and being all those things, but also just feeling safe enough to be yourself in the workplace, and not have to feel as a black woman that we're always under attack. And then from that is that hypersensitivity that we then feel, because we feel like we need to protect ourselves all the time. It's a very exhausting cycle. So the reason I've named this episode God Is In The Neighbourhood, because I feel like in order for us to really start breaking down some of these constructs, we have to share the information. And if God is always going to be in the neighborhood, and it's a figurative quote, right? Then we also need to be able to be allies in that neighborhood, because God is using all of us to be able to disseminate information and share information. Like, we have to also see ourselves as vessels to deconstruct some of these barriers. And in order for you to see yourself as somebody who can deconstruct these barriers, we have to share. Because the only way we are going to be able to start confronting some of the issues that affect our employment is by educating ourselves and sharing with others. Tell people about this podcast episode. Tell people about the podcast. Tell people about the platform and the masterclasses. Because if we are armed with the knowledge, we're armed with power. If we're armed with power, we're able to advocate for ourselves, and we can start leveling the playing field when it comes to money, when it comes to position, how many of you are sick and tired of looking at senior management talk about discrimination, and how they're allies and all of this shit, and talk about diversity, but yet you can't see one black woman in senior management or as a stakeholder in an organization? We're tired of this. I know I'm tired of this. When an organization is trying to sell itself to me and say, tell me what I can offer them, I feel like saying, well, what is it that you can offer me in terms of progress when your senior management has no black person? That's what I feel like asking them. So how do I ask them this question? Where can somebody with my skill and ability hope to see themselves in your organization in 5 years' time? I ask these questions. In other words, will I be a stakeholder? Will I be not a stakeholder? Will I be a shareholder? Yeah. We need to start educating ourselves, and we need to start arming ourselves with information. So if this podcast is 1% towards that, then I feel very happy. But please, I am urging you, If you are looking to start a family, if you are pregnant, it doesn't matter how far into your pregnancy you are, if you are being disadvantageously treated in the workplace because you're pregnant, if you feel uncomfortable to start a family because you're your employer, please listen to this episode. Please go and listen to the maternity masterclass, and please go and re-listen to previous episodes, because that is the only way we are going to start making things a bit more even out here in the employment space. If you want to follow me on social media, I have my personal Instagram page, which is Toya_Washington. I have my Toya Talks podcast Instagram page, which is Toya_Talks. And of course, I am on TikTok, Toya Washington. I am also on Snapchat, which is the original birthplace of the Toya Talks podcast and platform, which is Toya Washington on Snapchat. And of course, if you have a workplace dilemma or life-related dilemma that you think that we'll be able to help you with, your anonymity will be protected. Your name, your position, and key information will not be shared. I will change certain things if I feel like you've overshared certain information that could identify you. But if you know that, possibly that we'll be able to help, email hello@toytalks.com, and just know that your anonymity will be protected, and I'll do my best to try and answer your dilemma. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say to you that I really hope this podcast episode helped someone, because for me, one of my main motivations is just to help my community. It really is that. By sharing my experiences, by sharing information, I really want to take this podcast in the direction of leveling the playing field. That's the direction, and that has always been the objective by educating you all. But I'm saying it, and also as well, I think it's important to be able to create safe spaces for Black women, because when we start creating safe spaces, we start sharing. Once we start sharing, we start seeing correlation in our experiences, and then we start finding a way to navigate and finding a plan to start disseminating some of the disadvantages that we're experiencing here. I want to be like my white counterpart that feels comfortable to tell everybody that she's pregnant without feeling that you're going to be punished by your employer. I want that for us as well as Black women. I don't want to have to hold down 2 jobs and not tell my employer I'm pregnant. If I'm holding down 2 jobs, damn well I want to tell each employer I'm pregnant. I just don't need to tell them I'm employed by the other. Do you know what I mean? And even from a financial sense, I speak about this in the maternity masterclass, about the financial aspect of maternity. There's an element of you have to save, because society is not built to encourage you to have children. In fact, the reverse is the case. That statutory maternity leave, maternity pay ain't shit. It isn't. I mean, by the time I finish buying the milk, by the time I've finished buying the nappies and the cream and everything else, is it £172? Absolutely not. And they don't actually incorporate the cost of living to bump it up. No. And if you earn over a certain amount of money, you're not entitled to any benefits. So if that's not telling you that you need to now start stacking, I don't know what else will. But again, I cover it in the masterclass, so hopefully you'll go ahead and have a watch and download the templates, and hopefully it will help you on your journey into maternity. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to thank each and every one of you for joining me, for listening, for supporting the podcast, the platform, and please do share the podcast. I think there's so many people that could benefit, and this is why I'm on TikTok, just to raise more awareness about the platform, because I think it's important. Knowledge is power. Power gives you options, and as soon as you have options, your bargaining strength changes. And as Black women, it's about time we now start navigating from a position of power. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toya Talks podcast.